Hey everybody, I'm Candace Shively with Utah State University Extension and the Center for Water Efficient Landscaping, and you are watching our Water Well with CWEL webinar series.
My name is Joanna Endter-Wada, and we organized this seminar today to tell you more about our partnerships with Eagle Mountain City and Salt Lake City and the implementation of some weather stations in their service areas. I direct the Water Maps program. I'm a faculty member involved with CWEL, and my interest in having localized weather data was that it's one of the key inputs into the Water Maps program that we use to assess the appropriateness of landscape watering at a parcel scale and can look across service areas to identify places with capacity to conserve. We use water maps as a research tool and a water management tool and a public information tool. And we've had a webinar about water maps in December, and we had last month in February as part of the series a webinar about the land cover classification. That's a key input into water maps. But the local weather data and watering plants to meet local water-based plant need is a key element of the calculations we do. So I was thrilled that I could lead an effort to secure the funding to implement these weather stations you're going to hear about today. So as a couple introductory comments, we'll turn it over to Stephanie Duer and Evan Berrett with their respective cities to just make a few comments about their interest in having these weather stations within their areas. Evan, why don't you go first?
Sure. My name is Evan Berrett. I'm the assistant to the city administrator for Eagle Mountain City. I've been coordinating with Utah State University on their water maps and water checks programs, and it's been a very valuable resource to have. And we're looking forward to all the things it'll bring in the future. This has been really important to us as in our area, what we call the Cedar Valley. It's just a little different than some of the other parts of Utah County and Salt Lake County as well. We all know that the United States as a country and even the North American continent has very diverse climates, and those diverse climates can be very small. We noticed that the climate data that we were getting just wasn't really cutting it, and fortunately, with the partnership with USU, we were able to get a couple of weather stations, and we actually needed those two different weather stations because even in two different parts of our city, we had different types of climates, and so it was important to separate those out. Obviously, it's as Joanna said, very important for us with the water maps. We're looking forward to that data being a very big component of our water conservation efforts. But then on top of that, the weather stations also have provided some interesting information as well for even things like our economic development efforts. Our area, we have a lot of land. We have about 50 square miles to build into, and we're starting to attract attention from businesses such as data centers. And data centers look at things like that. They like to know what the climate is like, and those sorts of things can impact their costs related to cooling their equipment and whatnot. And so that kind of data, having that at such a local level has been very valuable in pushing that forward. And so very much looking forward to what comes of the future, and I'm very grateful for the partnership with USU to have these stations at Eagle Mountain.
Thank you, Evan. Stephanie, would you like to make a couple comments?
Sure. Hi, everyone. One is this has been a really it's been a great journey, and it just seems that this project keeps getting better and better and more exciting all the time. So we worked with USU and the Climate Center to install initially 4 weather stations, though we ended up with 5 plus the one at Murray Park being upgraded, which is an incredible asset for us. Originally, our service area, which covers 120 some odd square miles, had one weather station out at the airport, which is not the best location to have a weather station for landscape, for calculating landscape water need. So working with USU and the Climate Center through an EWIG grant, we were able to install these weather stations, mostly at our golf course sites, and they're thrilled. So, you know, like an immediate value is that our golf course managers, as well as our parks managers and other facility managers, will have much better data now from which to schedule their irrigation systems. At the next level, any citizen can now access this data. So with the growth in cloud-based irrigation control devices and such, having better weather data access is going to be quite helpful. Our own internally, also our stormwater group and our watershed group was very excited to learn that we were installing these weather stations to help them in their both their record keeping and also projecting water supply and potentially anticipating flood events. So it's had a lot of value within the utility itself. And then interestingly, I was in a meeting last week with a bunch of folks around the Southwest discussing drought. And it just came up in conversation that we had these stations and that we were installing them. And so the Drought Mitigation Center and Climate Centers in Nebraska and Colorado are very interested and have already linked onto those sites. So the value of these weather stations here and in Eagle Mountain is already growing exponentially. And then on top of that, what it will do to inform and improve our data with water maps. It's been a great project, and the video is so cool. You guys are going to really enjoy it.
Thank you, Stephanie. So Stephanie used the word EWIG grant, and I would like to acknowledge that's our shorthand way of talking about an Extension Water Initiative grant. It's funding that comes through the state that we apply for, and it requires a match. So in each of these cases, we were able to partner with Eagle Mountain City and Salt Lake City to secure that grant. So we partnered on the funding, and we're partnering on the work and the use of the data. So the partnership here at Utah State University clearly is under the extension umbrella, and it brings together those of us in the Center for Water Efficient Landscaping and in the Utah Climate Center. So I'm going to turn it over to Jobie and Alan, who have prepared a wonderful video that gives you some field images of the installation of the weather stations and what they look like and where the data that comes from those weather stations resides. And
well, I'll just introduce myself, Jobie Carlisle, and together with Alan, we run about 150 weather stations throughout the state and the surrounding border state areas. And we had the opportunity to participate in this project, and we're excited to do so. Alan has put together a little presentation, and it's pre-recorded, which we will show you shortly. But Alan, do you have anything else you'd like to add?
Pleasure to be here to share this information. I've enjoyed putting it together. I've been working with the Utah Climate Center as a technician since October in 2019, and I love that opportunity to go out across the state and make sure all these weather stations are in tip-top shape.
One thing we've learned in the Center for Water Efficient Landscaping and working with the Utah Climate Center is all that goes into maintaining the stations and calibrating them and helping to ensure that we have very reliable and good weather data to use. So thank you very much, Jobie and Alan, for the work that you and your teams do. So we'll go to their video next.
Hi, everyone. I'm Alan Moller. I'm one of the research technicians working with Jobie Carlisle at the Utah Climate Center. In October of 2020, we were involved in the installation of 5 new weather stations in the Salt Lake area to support landscape water conservation. In our presentation, we will give an introduction to evapotranspiration weather stations located in Eagle Mountain City and Salt Lake City. We will discuss what these stations are and what their purpose is, what kind of weather variables an ET weather station needs to measure, and we'll discuss some of the considerations used in choosing a proper location for these types of weather stations. We'll also show you some of the data outputs and various intervals of that data that are produced from these weather stations. And we'll show you how to access our website, view and download some of this data. Further discussion will be given by Dr. Kelly Kopp about how the ET derived from these weather stations can improve irrigation water use efficiency and aid in conservation efforts. So what is ET? Well, ET is evapotranspiration, and this is the sum of the processes of evaporation from the soil surfaces and transpiration from plants. And a weather station that is used for consideration of evapotranspiration is one that is properly sited in an irrigated setting. And some of the measurements from these weather stations include the following variables: solar radiation, temperature, humidity, and wind speed. So does a typical ET weather station measure ET? No, it does not. Measured weather variables are used to calculate a reference ET value, either for tall vegetation, which is ETR, or short vegetation, which is ETO. These reference ET values are converted into an estimate of actual evapotranspiration by applying a crop coefficient. These crop coefficients are specific to the species of plant in that location. They vary throughout the growing season, and they assume that the plants are fully watered. Now we will show you some of the considerations used for choosing a new location for an ET weather station. These are guidelines for optimal siting. So some stations are going to have exceptions based on the limitations of those various locations. One of the considerations, first off, is the irrigated field size. How big is it? Ideally, at least 9,000 square feet. That would give you the most optimal type of setting. Height restrictions. This refers to obstacles that could affect adversely the measurement of variables like wind and temperature. So the separation of a station and an obstacle should ideally be 10 times the height of the obstacle. And we also consider crop and the field condition. A uniform crop with a maximum height less than 1.5 feet is ideal, and the field condition should be uniformly and optimally irrigated so that there's no plant water stress. The tower should be situated either in the center of an irrigated field if the wind directions are highly variable, or within 150 feet of the downwind irrigated field edge if the winds predominate from one direction. And the tower security might be something to consider in an urban setting for cases of vandalism or other nefarious situations. So that's a consideration there. Telemetry is important. You want to have a good cell signal so you can get connected remotely to the weather station. Access is important so that we can provide maintenance to the station and make sure that it's operating to the best of its ability. These are the two weather stations we have installed in Eagle Mountain City. These particular weather stations contain the sufficient instrumentation to measure evapotranspiration, and they are a bit more compact in layout than our standard suite that we will show you in the next slide. As far as the weather stations in Salt Lake Valley are concerned, we've only had this station here in Murray in our network. And so one data point for the entire Salt Lake Valley in our network wasn't very strong for considering overall calculation of evapotranspiration and using that toward water conservation goals. And so with this project of installing 5 new weather stations, you can see it really filled in nicely, going from Glendale up to Rose Park, Bonneville Golf Course, Forestdale, and down to the pump house at 60 Joanna South near Highland Drive. In these pictures you can see the layout of the standard setting for our ag weather stations, and this really does a good job of filling in the gap, especially in the urban setting of the Salt Lake Valley, to get these evapotranspiration calculations. And now we'd like to show you a video of the build of these weather stations, and so we'll take a minute and let this play out for you. I hope you enjoyed that. Here we have the weather station that we installed at Forestdale, and you can see the standard layout here for the weather stations in our ag weather network. The enclosure here houses the data logger, cell modem, power controller, and the battery, so everything is wired up into this enclosure. The solar panel is a 55-watt panel. Here we have the temperature and relative humidity sensor. This is in an aspirated shield, so there's a fan in there drawing a continuous stream of fresh air, so we have an accurate measurement of temperature and relative humidity. Here is the wind speed and direction sensor, a tipping bucket rain gauge that measures in increments of 1/100th of an inch per tip. We have a solar radiation sensor right there. This is a wetness sensor, or precipitation detection, that basically validates the precipitation measurements in our other rain gauges. Here we have a weighing precipitation gauge, and so this has a bucket inside with an amount of antifreeze and oil to allow frozen precipitation to be collected, and the antifreeze will keep it from freezing, and we can get a measurement of precipitation accumulation throughout the entire year. And then down here we have the soil moisture and temperature sensors, and at these locations we've put them in at 2-inch depth and 4-inch depth. And then on top here we have a cell modem antenna. This is a ProxyCast omnidirectional antenna. Some locations will require different types of antennas to get the best signal. The data from all the instrumentation on these weather stations is collected by the data logger at intervals of every 10 seconds. Now, the output of these variables are put into tables, and it's composed of both measured and calculated variables. The available output tables that we have include a 15-minute interval, hourly, and daily frequencies. We'll go ahead and show you how to access the Utah Climate Center website and view this data from these weather stations and download it and use it however you need to. So here's our homepage for the Utah Climate Center, and you can find the weather station data in this Climate Data tab under Utah Ag Weather and also under the Maps tab. And then we have these larger icons. Ag Weather is where we find these weather stations. Map Server has access to historical climate data across the country, but the Ag Weather is focused strictly on the UTC Climate Center network. So we'll click on that, and that brings you to this map interface with all of our networks in the UCC network. We have agreement stations, which are part of the Bureau of Land Management Climate Reference Network, all the way down to fruit growers networks. And you can go ahead and toggle these on and off to view the map however you like. And we're focusing in on the Ag Weather network here. And so I'll just zoom in on the map here a little bit. And these drop-down menus for each network up at the top have the list of every station in each network. And you can go ahead and scroll down and select a station directly from that list. And you can also directly select a station on the map just by hovering over these points and clicking on that way. And so I'm going to go ahead and open up the View Station Data in a new tab, and this will bring up the weather station data from the Forestdale station. So here we have a snapshot of the station current conditions on the left here, and a picture and site data on the right. And you can also click on these tabs here for metric or English units as you desire. And scrolling down a little bit here, we have a visualization of the data. So we have temperature and humidity, wind speed, precipitation, solar. Here's the evapotranspiration calculations and some of the turf soil measurements at 4 and 2 inches. So looking at more closely, you can toggle between the intervals between minute, hourly, and daily. And one of the things on this, you can scroll on the chart and it will show you a display at each data point what the values are. And if it's a little noisy, you can toggle on and off these variables in the legend here and clean it up. If you want to look at max and min temperature strictly, then you can do that, and it'll show you those points a little bit more cleanly. Now if we go over to the wind speed and check out some of the hourly data here, if you want to take a closer look at some of these observations over the last 30 days, you can click on it and drag for as long or as little as you want, and it will zoom in to that segment that you choose, and you can get a closer look at the date and time of these average and peak wind speeds. And once you're done with a particular zoom, if you want to look at a different spot, you can reset the zoom right there and it'll go back to the 30-day view. And also you can change the month view here. So for every month that's available for that station, you can select a new month and it will change the graph view to represent the days for that month. And other options you have here, once you have a view and point, you can print the chart or download a picture of the image. And so here I can choose a JPEG image of this wind speed graph, and here you have a JPEG of that image. And so you can do this for as many as you need for a report or whatnot. And if you need to go further into a complete data set and bring it into a spreadsheet for other calculations, you can download right here. So if you want the first 2 weeks in February, for example, you can choose a start date and an end date, and then select the interval that you would like, either minute, hourly, or daily. So I'm going to go ahead and download the minute data, and this will bring up a CSV file which we can open up in Excel. And here we have all the data that's been downloaded from the data logger for that station over that period of time. And all the variables are there. And so you can take that and sort it and do whatever calculations you desire. And if you're interested in information about what those variables are on the spreadsheet in that output, you can look up this ag weather station information, and that will have a list of all the variables used in each chart for the 15-minute data and an explanation of what they are. And so that'll have it for each, the 15-minute and the hourly and the daily. So there you have all the description for that. And one thing more to show you, here's the quick view data. This is just if you want to, rather than seeing the graph presentation, this will present the data in a tabular format for each interval period, and you can scroll through there back in time and just kind of get a quick view of the data points without the visualization. So that's how you access the station data and download the information from the website. And we'll go from there. Thank you to the key people and organizations whose help and enthusiasm made the installation of these 5 weather stations possible. We really appreciate the opportunity we've had to share this information with you and hope you will find it useful. Again, thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, we'll move on right now to have Kelly Kopp's presentation. Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you, Joanna. I very much appreciate the opportunity to present some information in concert with the Climate Center, because for me, I will say this has been sort of a long-standing goal, is relating more the work that I do in water conservation to the Climate Center and making that very, very available to the public. So I very much appreciate the opportunity. So I'm going to be talking about using some of the local weather station data that Alan just described with smart irrigation controllers. And just to introduce the topic a bit, smart irrigation controllers automatically adjust irrigation to account for local weather conditions, which is terrific as long as you've got good data to work with. And that's where these weather stations, at least in my estimation, and granted, I probably am a bit biased, but these weather stations that have been installed by the Climate Center provide the highest quality data available to us here in the state of Utah. So I'm, again, thrilled to be able to work with this data. So smart irrigation controllers basically work to interrupt irrigation for different things like rain, frost, extreme wind conditions, and things like that. And they also allow programming for different types of plant materials, sprinklers, soil, a number of different things, which I will show you shortly. Some also account for distribution uniformity of sprinkler systems, which is something that we measure routinely in one of our outreach programs known as the Water Check program, where we help folks evaluate irrigation systems. So they can be programmed with quite a bit of information, and they rely, however, on good weather data to allow irrigation or to disallow irrigation. So we've done here at USU, as part of the Center for Water Efficient Landscaping, quite a bit of research with different smart controllers. Several years ago, we did a study with climate-based irrigation controllers, those that you see here. And I just wanted to emphasize that within the circle there, what you see is that depending on the type of control you're using, they get weather data in different ways. So in the case of this Rainbird controller that we tested, it used public and private weather station data that was managed by a centralized server. And so those were the first controls that we tested. But I wanted to just share quickly some of the results we found, and just to reiterate why this is so important to us. So this research was done in 2011 and 2012. And what I want to point out is that the highest line there with the closed circles, the black circles, that was our controller, which is a little bit of a mouthful, but basically that's not a smart controller. And what you see below that are the water applications for the various climate-based controllers that we tested. And in every case, they applied less water than our standard irrigation controller. And depending on the type of controller that we were testing, they saved anywhere from 37 to 48% of water over a growing season. So we found that they were very effective in adjusting response to weather. And we found that depending on the year, one or the other controller might have better results, but they all, again, performed better than the standard irrigation controller. And not to get too bogged down in this slide, but I wanted to show it because one of the things that's been important to us in our work with this is that, yes, we must save water, but we also want to maintain plant health and quality, because in working with the public, we know how very important that is. And what we were able to find in this particular study is that right through the growing season, the majority of the time, the turf grass quality was maintained with these climate-based controllers. So they saved water, they maintained turf grass quality, and they performed very well. Now, more recently, we've done some research with Wi-Fi enabled controllers. And so I like to think of these as comparable to something like a Nest thermostat, which perhaps is more familiar to some of you, but they work in the same way in that you can essentially do everything from your phone, which there's my phone. You can do everything from your phone. You can control these things from anywhere you have Wi-Fi access. And so in this particular study, it was a similar design in which we did have a standard controller, which is the Hunter. But we also tested 3 different Wi-Fi enabled controllers, including the Beehive controller, the Ratio controller, and the Skydrop controller. And this gives you a sense of the kinds of programming that these different controllers require. So I mentioned soil, sprinkler type. I mentioned, I believe, plant material. You can also input slope. You can input distribution uniformity or efficiency in some cases, but just a number of different things that you can input to customize it that much more to your particular property. And again, I just show this quickly and I don't want to get too caught up in it, but what we found was that water application definitely differed among the controllers, but they also all saved water when compared to what a typical UTON applies. And that's something that we've been monitoring for many, many years through the Water Check program. But they were very, very effective. And similarly to before with the climate-based controllers, we did not see any decline in percent green cover, or if you want to think of this as approximating the quality of the turf grass. So they performed exceedingly well. They all saved water. In some cases, they use less than half the water of what a standard program might use. So we've been very, very pleased with those results and are strong proponents of their use in the state. Now, having said that, I want to talk a little bit about how irrigation might be scheduled in the state, and recognize that not everyone has a smart controller or even wants a smart controller, but there are lots of resources available, including resources through the state's Division of Water Resources, which is the website here on the left, water.utah.gov. That is their main website where you can get all kinds of information about water in the state of Utah. But I wanted to also direct you to this conservewater.utah.gov website, where they are providing recommendations on irrigation scheduling that you can then utilize and program manually. And the way that they are doing that is using weather station data from this particular group of weather stations across the state. And so that is one option when you don't necessarily have access to or interest in using a smart controller. However, there's been a lot of effort recently in the state of Utah, and I would say this is with some guidance from the state legislature to our state's Division of Water Resources on smart controller rebates and programs to promote water conservation. So right now in the state of Utah, any citizen in the state is eligible for a rebate on a smart irrigation controller. And this is what you would find if you went to the homepage of the program, and there is a fair bit of information required from you to sign up, but this is where you can actually get a rebate of as much as $75 for installing one of these smart controllers. So I want to walk you through how you might associate a smart controller like one of these that we've tested with the data from the Climate Center, so that you are getting high quality weather data and you're getting an irrigation program that works well for your local area. Now, we tested these irrigation controllers, but the state of Utah actually rebates any EPA WaterSense certified irrigation controller. I can't get into how to program all of those and associate them with weather station data. So I'm going to focus on the Rachio controller that you see there on the lower right. So with the Rachio controller, again, it's a Wi-Fi enabled controller. This is their website, rachio.com. And it talks about their use of weather intelligence to automatically adjust scheduling, talks about when it might skip irrigations due to rain, freeze, seasonal changes, etc. And then beyond that, it asks, how can you tell what weather stations are closest to my home? So right here, what you can see on the left is, depending on the model of Rachio controller that you're using, it's going to access weather data differently. So the latest model, the Rachio 3, accesses data from Weather Underground, which is that wonderground.com website. But some of the older models, generation 2, accesses weather from PWS, which is Personal Weather Station weather.com. So, and this is going to be different depending on the type of controller that you're using. But in our case, let's pretend we have the latest and greatest Rachio, which, by the way, is something I'm actually planning on purchasing myself. And so as I went into the website through the Rachio website, it connected me to Weather Underground. And in this case, I was able to look at several weather stations in the Salt Lake City service area. So what you see here in the red circle, I want to point out, I've selected the Rose Park weather station, which happens to be the weather station that Jobie and Allen and company installed this past growing season. But I will just say that one thing that makes this process a little bit tricky, and I'd love to get Jobie and Allen's insights on this as well, but depending on the website that you use to access these weather stations, they are referred to by different names. That makes it a little bit tricky. And so the way that I have done this and made sure that this is the correct weather station is to look at the geographic coordinates. So it's very small right there, but the geographic coordinates are listed. And if I were to go to the Climate Center website, which Alan just showed us, and go to the Rose Park Weather Station, I could determine whether or not those coordinates matched and whether that was the weather station I actually wanted to use. So again, depending on the site you use, these weather stations have different nomenclature. That makes things a little bit tricky. Not impossible, but just something that you would want to confirm. Now here, I also wanted to just show you an example if you were to use pwsweather.com, which is again, personal weather station weather.com. And this is one of the stations that Jobie and Alan and company installed in Eagle Mountain. But again, the nice thing here is that the geographic coordinates are listed. And that's something that you can, again, go back to the Climate Center website rather, and confirm that that's the actual weather station you want to use. So that is the way that you can then associate these weather stations with the controller that you are utilizing. I did just want to take a minute and do a little promotion here for the Water Check program, which is a program that I've been running for a number of years and that's available in many parts of the state. The website is there to sign up online, as well as the phone number. And we do perform in-person water checks in a number of locations in the state. And I just wanted to mention this because this program helps identify irrigation system problems. And even if you are already using one of these Wi-Fi based controllers or smart controllers, it's still helpful to have assistance in identifying problems with your irrigation system so that the weather station data that you associate with your controller can be utilized in the most efficient way possible. So that's what this particular program does. We do have in-person appointments in many parts of the state, but we also have a web-based tool to help you do it yourself if those in-person programs don't happen to be available to you in your location. So that was sort of my quick and speedy illustration of how you would associate data from these weather stations to a climate-based or Wi-Fi enabled controller.